Hello.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Thanks a lot, Dr. Shankar and Rahul. Yeah, so we're about half time through, and we still have about three speakers, including myself. So I'd try to, be a little quick. Also, given that we've already had a very good background to whatever Dr. Shankar and Rahul has spoken. I am entirely going to talk about autonomous cars, purely from the perspective of, the excitement that it brings, so to speak, and also my personal interest. So, yeah, I don't want to talk about my company, or maybe I will. So I come from Dolcera. We are a IP and technology services firm. We use a lot of literature in terms of patents, scientific literature, business information to help companies like Mahindra and Mahindra, General Electric, and so on, in other technologies as well, bring these products faster to the market. Give them information to help enable decision making as well. Now, today, I thought to keep it a bit structured in the sense that we'll talk about the overall change that the autonomous cars are going to bring to the automobile sector. So we'll talk a bit about the overview. Various individual components, Dr. Shankar has already talked about a few. I will take a couple as well. And then how the value chain, has changed, or would change rather, in the coming years. And then also some insights that we've gathered from various reports we've done over the course of these couple of years. So I guess this is sort of already covered, because Dr. Shankar laid a very good background with respect to how a autonomous car would work. But I just maybe extend that understanding a bit further. So think of a car right now. There is, like any other machine, it has an input, some processing, and an output. So the car itself, its engine and so on, would give the output of, for example, driving you forward, maybe sometimes taking a break and navigating through roads and so on. The input to that is, your intelligence right now, other traffic, components you see, and you obviously perform the processing your own self. By your own self, by deciding the speed, by deciding the course of the road, and so on. Now, we want to, in the coming years, outsource the input and the processing to the machines. So that would require intelligent systems that require more input. So right now, the only, rather 5 years, 10 years back, the only input that was not your own self were probably mirrors, back view mirrors, and so on. But now we want to make them automatic. We want to have cameras, lidars, radars, and other sensors on the car to be able to make it a driverless, so to speak. And there are various other aspects that would happen by enabling a vehicle with these technologies. For example, cruise controls, lane keeping, blind spot detection, and several other traffic-related items that right now maybe are a challenge, right? Here are various components or various technologies that work together in making this whole thing possible, in making the whole system work independently, irrespective of what the human input to that is. Dr. Shankar talked about LiDAR, so it's basically a sort of a technology that maps or gives images to the system, based on which it can generate an output of moving forward and so on, like that. There are a lot of video cameras as well. So the problem again with LiDAR was the cost. Dr. Shankar mentioned from $70,000. That's when people started navigating and researching around technologies that could be used as alternatives to that technology. So, of course, there are competing technologies like radar and video camera. So these are the other two substitutes that are there for for the input of the road to the vehicle. Yeah, there is GPS, which is very important. Mapping is very important for helping a vehicle navigate through roads, because if you have a input already, you know that there is going to be a turn in 500 meters. The system, which is basically a LiDAR or radar, doesn't always need to be used for understanding when the lane has to change, and so many other individual operational challenges with respect to not having a driver on board, or rather taking things out of his hands. A lot of sensors around the proximity of other vehicles, around understanding the traffic signals, so to speak, understanding the motion around the vehicle, understanding the visibility and so on, and most importantly, a platform that can process all of this information and can navigate and can basically take a decision. So all of this, these 3-4 things are actually an input, right? And the processing platform, the AI processing platform is, personally to me, very important as well. Maybe it has, it's so important that people haven't been able to find an alternative, how to process all of this information, image recognition, video analysis, and so many other things. So, and therefore the decision making. All of what we have seen until these years, and not so good things also about autonomous cars, has probably been attributed to not so well evolved processing technique. So that means that there's so much emphasis on the AI part, and that's what I'm going to probably talk and because everything else, I guess, has sort of been talked about by Dr. Shankar. I will also talk about radar, because primarily Dr. Shankar talked about LiDAR. So that is basically the importance that I also personally feel the processing platform requires in the overall working of an autonomous car. Now, what is autonomous car? What is is there a definition? Are there regulations around as to what would qualify for autonomous car? So in 2014, SAE International, which is the Society of the Automotive Engineers, brought forward a proposal, sort of a standardization in terms of defining as to what levels of autonomy should rather be named, and what would happen in each of these levels. So level 0 obviously is no autonomy, which means I am driving my own very simple vehicle. Level 1 means some driver assistance, probably around, for example, assistance systems on speed, on direction, both longitudinally and latitudinally. So basically, the driver still controls the forward movement and the lateral movement. Then a partial autonomy would mean, for example, that the system will give some mentorship to the driver and can take back the control whenever required. Conditional formatting means, conditional autonomy means, for example, in case of an event, in case of let's say a traffic hurdle or some sort of an animal on the road or something like that, that the system asks for assistance from the driver itself. Then high autonomy would mean all aspects and dynamics of the autonomous car would take over from the vehicle, and full autonomous means that everything in the car and on the road is autonomous. So we've talked a lot about, for example, what has to happen inside the car. We talked about some input device. We've talked about platforms that will handle that data. There also has a lot of infrastructure that has to be developed on the road itself. Yeah, for example, signals. For example, so lane departure. I'll give you an example. So lane departure, or why should a car not go laterally, is a question. For example, I'm not driving it. I know if I drive left or right, I will go off road. The machine doesn't know that unless you give it an input, and that input has to be from the road as well. So there have to be some sort of signal mechanism that can be read by this device so that it can take it to the processing unit, which means that the road itself, the infrastructure of the road also would have to change, right? When you're trying to park a car automatically, it also means that you should know its surroundings properly. So basically there has to be also an upgrade in the road infrastructure as well, and that would mean full autonomous. Now, a lot of things have already happened. If you see, now there are three components here. Again, there is safety and ADAS, advanced driver assistance system, connectivity, and then autonomy, right? So there are various individual technologies, various individual enabling technologies that have already been researched about or have already been practiced. So starting from 2010, things like lane departure warning. So if you are trying to depart a certain lane on connected roads, the system will either let the person know something is happening, you need to be aware. Or things like that, or cruise control. A lot of us are already familiar with cruise control. You can set the speed based on the permissible limits on a certain highway, and then rely on the system to cruise you forward, right? So these are basic things, and talk about, for example, urban autonomous driving, where infrastructure has to be in place. The cars should be able to process so much information and so on. And in between, so many things. For example, autopilot on the highway. These are things like on the red are things where where the development is still on course and commercialization is yet to come. Right. So the blue ones are something where people are already commercializing. However, there is still development, there is still room for improvement already happening, and green is the ideal situation, right? Now, why should Mahindra invest into autonomous cars? I mean, it's okay, fine, it's happening, but the thing is, it's an opportunity that should not be forgone. Like how do I put this forward? In order for everybody to coexist, obviously, you look at your own opportunity. You look at the opportunity of the market that you will forgo if you don't play in, right? So the market for autonomous car is projected to move forward at a CAGR of 43%, right? That is like it's doubling every third, fourth year. Right, so that means that now this is not this numbers. They're not for the automotive market. These are autonomous car innovations. And I'll come to the next slide. I'll tell you and define in the value chain as to where this particular part of the market will come from. Right, so not all part of this market will go to an OEM. Right, so because OEMs not always are the only guys trying to build components, trying to make processing techniques and so on available. So, and there again, there are drivers that require you to now follow having autonomous abilities. Yeah. So this is the value chain. I mean, if I had to summarize my whole presentation, this is one slide I'd probably spend a bit more time on. Now, look at, and that's the theme of my presentation as well, like how did an automotive industry look 10 years back in time, and how does it look now, or how is it going to look in the next 5 years, is a paradigm shift, right? So you would only see OEMs right at the end. But the market starts from companies like Qualcomm and NXP making a processor. Sensors being made by Velodyne and Continental, Bosch, Autoliv, Denso, and so many other companies like that. So there is, although these companies that I just talked about, for example, Denso and Continental and Bosch have already been automotive suppliers, right? So Mahindra would tell you that. But the level of leverage these guys are going to have in the coming years is going to increase, right? So that would change the dynamics of the market. And that is why OEMs need to actually invest as well and be at least, if not forward, at least parallel to these technologies, steps back in the value chain so as to survive, right? And in the corresponding slides, I have actually made that distinction as well in terms of who is actually innovating more in these technologies, given, let's say, being an automotive player, an OEM, or a supplier. That makes it even more important for a pure automotive company to keep investing and being on top of their game. So then there are these big guys on the infrastructure and connectivity and software as well, right? So people like Google, they'll eat you up. They have very large, deep pockets. Companies like and connectivity as well. For example, Dr. Shankar talked about connected cars, and there's so much you have to worry about in terms of being able to be abreast of everything that is to do with your car at any point in time. So connectivity companies like AD&E, Sprint, and so on, and anybody else for that matter, will also play a role and have a share of the market overall, right? Then there are pure algorithm or processing-based companies like Google, and there are so many others that are going to come up. And I will maybe talk a bit about this in the last two slides as well. So the shift is so huge that there are so many people trying to take a share of the whole car, and that will determine so much on who is driving their innovation forward very quickly and very efficiently. I'd move forward here and talk a bit about the R&D inside. I'll start with radar. So this is the distinction of how much innovation is happening in the area of radar, specifically for autonomous cars, by various OEMs versus some of the chosen suppliers. Right? If you see, Denso Corporation and Robert Bosch has 587 active patents in radar, whereas the top automotive player, which is far ahead of its next competitor, has only 5 to 7. So that tells you the amount of focus, for example, these suppliers and the leverage they bring to the making of the overall car in the coming years. Yeah, that's a very important point to note overall for the industry going forward. It's an opportunity for guys to innovate, and it's a challenge for the current guys to move forward, right? Now, individually inside radar, what are these patents doing? What is this innovation about? So there are guys trying to innovate on, for example, collision avoidance, right? So a lot of patents on both sides on that activity, right? More so on the OEMs, because it'll come to them, right? A lot of patents also on the adaptive cruise control, right? And very little activity towards the lane departure and warning, because that's something that a lot of people have already been doing, slightly simpler to do or something like that. Now, and what is the investment like in radar? Where are people investing inside radar to make it a bit more better? Because remember, the competing technology is LiDAR. This is getting cheaper. How can radar keep abreast and be still very innovative, right? So machine learning, data processing, communication, component control, and vehicle dynamics. These are major investment areas in the radars area, and companies that are trying to innovate, small companies in that area. You know, I've chosen, this is a very convenient sample. This is not a comprehensive list of startups, but this is something that I and also personally felt very important. So we chose them for the sake of this presentation. RB Robotics, they use 4-dimensional imaging technology from radar and capture things in all planes at once to give information. Metawave is a revolving, sort of a adjusting radar that gives information as well, real time. Under is again a 4-dimensional component that gives information at an instant point of time for the autonomous driving area. Now, the last bit, and this is maybe a minute away from my presentation, is AI, is the platform that processes all of this information coming from these LiDARs, these radars, any other input, and being able to take a decision, right? And you would see here as well a lot of patents being filed by OEMs, and a lot of patents being filed as well by the suppliers, right? So Robert Bosch again on top, IBM, Siemens, Hitachi, Samsung, Microsoft, all pitching in with their computing abilities, with their computing prowess to be able to help OEMs drive innovation, right? And what are the areas individually inside these platforms that people are innovating about, right? About a lot of activity in the artificial neural networks, which basically helps mimic the human intelligence. Like, so artificial neural network obviously is basically a technology that has been designed or kept into life by making sure it mimics how our synaptic network works, right? Then a lot of classification technology based patents, a lot of patents on machine learning again. So trying to make machines work better on its own learning and course of the navigation. A lot of patents are also from General Electric in that sense. Again, machine learning happens to again be an area where a lot of investment is being done by these companies, and I have chosen a few startups to wrap this up with: AI Motive, Argo, and Newtonomy. These are very small companies that are very recent and have shown promise to make a better system in place to take these decisions based on the input that these radars, LiDARs, cameras, sensors, and so on generate. And that's the end of the presentation. I thank you all for having a patient listening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.